What if the voice you've trusted your entire life isn't the one that's been leading you? Don't answer too quickly. Most people never do. Because if that question has never occurred to you before, there's a reason for that. From the archives of my Shadowdelve research, among hundreds of observations gathered throughout my investigation, one has refused to leave me. It wasn't marked as dangerous. It wasn't hidden. In fact, it appeared almost insignificant, yet I have come to suspect it may be one of the most important observations ever recorded. It simply reads: the most powerful influence acting upon a person is rarely recognized because it has already learned to sound like their own voice. I closed the archive after reading those words, not because I understood them, but because I wasn't certain I wanted to. For years, I assumed influence was easy to recognize by a persuasive speaker, a political movement, advertising, social media, even direct propaganda. History is full of obvious attempts to shape the human mind. Those are the influences everyone talks about. The archives never seemed particularly interested in them. Instead, they kept returning to something much quieter, something that never demanded attention, something that never needed permission. Perhaps you've experienced it. Someone you love dies, or your life changes in a single afternoon. Then suddenly, everything becomes clear. The worries you had don't consume you, they disappear. The ambitions you believed defined your life become strangely silent. Arguments lose their importance. Time itself feels different. And for a brief moment, you see with a remarkable clarity, almost as though you've awakened from a dream you never realized you were having. Then, weeks pass, months, and then slowly, without noticing when it happens, the same concerns return, the same distractions also, the same ambitions, and the same endless noise. Eventually, you become the person you were before, or at least someone very close to it. I've often wondered, why does clarity seem so temporary? Why is awakening so brief? Yet distraction feels almost effortless. The Shadowdelve Archives never answered those questions. They simply documented the pattern again and again and then again. There was another fragment that appeared several times throughout the records, never explained, only repeated. It never forces, it redirects. That sentence unsettled me more than I care to admit, because force leaves evidence, redirection rarely does. Have you ever left a conversation convinced you had reached your own conclusion, only to realize later you couldn't remember where that conclusion actually began? No single sentence changed your mind. No argument defeated you. Something simply shifted, quietly, almost invisibly, like the tide. You never see the precise movement it begins to turn, yet the entire ocean eventually moves. Perhaps ideas behave the same way. Perhaps thoughts do as well. I've started paying closer attention to ordinary moments. A phrase you've never suddenly used becomes part of your vocabulary. A fear you've never carried quietly becomes your own. And because it arrives without resistance, you never think to question its origins. That may be the strangest part of all. The deepest influences rarely feel foreign, they feel familiar, which makes them almost impossible to distinguish from ourselves. There is another observation that appeared repeatedly throughout Shadowdelve, not as a warning, but as a pattern. Every meaningful transformation begins the same way, not with an answer, with an interruption. For example, an illness, a loss, an encounter that refuses explanation, something breaks the rhythm. And for a brief moment, the current stops carrying you. And in that silence, questions begin to emerge. Who am I becoming? What have I been chasing? How much of my life has been intentional? And how much has simply been inherited? Those questions are dangerous, not because they reveal monsters, but because they quietly expose invisible architectures, the structures beneath your thinking, the assumptions beneath your decisions, and the currents beneath your direction. Perhaps that is why so few people remain there for long. Life resumes, the routines return, the familiar voices begin speaking again, and before long, those questions become quieter. Not because they were answered, but because they were replaced. Sometimes I wonder whether confusion is not the absence of truth, but the presence of too many borrowed certainties. Every generation inherits beliefs. Every culture inherits fears. Every family passes down ways of seeing the world. But most people spend their lives rearranging those inheritance without ever asking whether they belong to them at all. The archives suggest something even stranger, that the greatest influence upon a human being is not the one telling them what to think, it is the one convincing them they have already finished thinking. There was one final note, written in handwriting unlike the rest. No signature, only a single sentence. The easiest mind to guide is the one convinced it has already awakened. I've carried that sentence with me ever since, not because I know exactly what it means, but because every year that passes, it seems to mean something more. So, tonight, before your next certainty settles comfortably into place, pause for a moment, just once, and ask yourself a question that very few people never dare to ask. If this thought truly belongs to me, why have I never questioned where it came from? And until next Wednesday, continue observing not merely the world around you, but the quiet moments beneath it. Because the Shadow Delve have taught me something I can no longer ignore. The greatest forces rarely announce themselves. By the time you hear their voice, you've already mistaken it for your own. And remember, the raven is always watching.